Hello and welcome to this week's Alla-Prima portrait painting demonstration. So to start off with, I'll be using burnt umber diluted with a tad bit of paint thinner. As you can see, I'm dabbing some of it on my paper towel so that it's not too runny. And to start off with, I'll be establishing the top and bottom of the head so that I can have an idea of the placement in space. And then I'll quickly go into blocking in the outside shape rather loosely and kind of gesturally so that I can get a rough idea of where the head is going to fit in space. I'd like to emphasize the exercise of doing quick studies of heads in this way. It really helps you train your eye to see big dynamic shapes and help you simplify things that you see in nature that can be pretty difficult. Once I have the outside shape roughly established, I'll start to break those simple lines into more complex ones and carve out smaller forms in that way. So I'll use the outside shape to help me place the eye socket or the axis of the eyes on the head. Once I have a rough idea of where the eye socket and the bottom of the nose goes, then I'll start to block in a simple shape for the shadow. I'll make an indication of the side plane of the nose and the shadow for the inner eye socket as well as the side plane of the face. And I'll just use my drawing color to roughly etch in a value for it. Sometimes it helps to see form with just light and shade as opposed to lines alone. It will help you get an idea of the big picture. So now I'll start to mix a dark value for the hair mask. So I'm using a little bit of burnt umber, alizarin crimson, and ivory black. I'm now going to mix the shadow color of the side plane of the face. So I'm going to use a little bit of my burnt umber, some cadmium orange, and a little bit of Viridian to cool it down. So I'm thinking of the relative value of the shadow side of the face. It is a dark value, but it's not as dark as the dark shape of the hair. Once I have the shadow plane of the face masked in with color, I'm going to start thinking of the color of the light in relation to the color of the shadow. That is the color of the shadow warmer or is it cooler? Is it greener or is it more yellow? So since I'm using a natural light photo reference, the light is going to be a little bit cooler than the shadow. So I'm using a mix of cadmium orange, a little bit of yellow ochre, and some alizarin crimson to mix up this color. I'm also thinking of the relative value. Now it is obviously lighter than the shadow plane, but I'm trying to mix a somewhat warmer mid value, and I'm going to cover the entire face with this. So that is so that I can build up my lighter values and I can go darker with my darker values. So once I'm done laying in the large masses of colors on the head, I'm going to start getting into form modeling of the planes of the face. So what I'll do is I'll mix up a generic value scale using just basic flesh tones. You can see that the middle values are a little bit warmer. I won't be taking these colors directly and putting them onto the face, but I will be using them as references of my relative values next to one another. It kind of helps me to have this value scale on my palette as I mix colors to start modeling the face. When I do large form modeling, I think of the basic planes of the head and I start to sculpt out the values of the face according to the model that I see in front of me. Now this stage can be messy and you can lose your drawing quite easily at this stage. But after you've filled in kind of like a somewhat of a generic Greek sculpture or mannequin looking thing, you are able to draw right on top of it with your drawing color and re-establish where the features go. As you can see, I'm starting to mark in where the tear ducts go, the top of the forehead to the bottom of the chin. Just reassessing my drawing, picking up where I left off. That big brush right there is my fan brush. Looks kind of funny. I mainly do it just to get rid of glares. So sometimes if I paint with too much paint and at a certain light I get a glare and I don't like it. So now I'm going to start reassessing my drawing. I'm going to be using my drawing color once again to find my form boundaries, that is the areas where large forms end and where they meet. So I'm looking at the outside shape of the head and the smaller curves that come with it, and I'm going to be comparing that side to the shadow side of the head. This is where it helps to have a strong background in basic linear drawing, so you can come right back into a large mess like what I had just created. Although I did sculpt out the form kind of generically how I wanted to, but now using my experience in linear drawing, I'm able to come back and find my form boundaries. You have the side of the face, and then you have the edges of the eye sockets. And at this stage, I'm going to start to compare the inside of the tear ducts to where the mouth goes relatively. The inside of the eye will tell you somewhat where the ends of the mouth go. See, I have the center of the lip, and I'm comparing it to the nose. I'm comparing the distance of the philtrum to that of the chin. That is the distance from the nose to the mouth. I'm comparing that to the mouth to the chin. So I'm using my knowledge of linear drawing to further sculpt my forms. Once I have my big shapes as well placed as I'd like them to be, I can start to build smaller areas. As you can tell, I'm starting to model out the eyes. Even though you can consider these as small details, what I'm doing is I'm still thinking of what are the planes, what are the top planes, the side planes, the bottom planes. So I have generally 3 values that I'm working with. I have a dark, a middle, and a light. So I'm going to push around these values and try to sculpt the smaller subforms of the eyes just as carefully as I did the outside shapes of the face. Again, it helps to do many simple charcoal drawings or pencil sketches of the planes of the face. It helps as much with the big shapes as it does with the small shapes, since we are subdividing our shapes much in the same way. Whenever I'm painting, I try to keep myself at an arm's length or so away from my canvas or panel or whatever surface I'm working on, just so that I can get more of a bird's eye view of what I'm looking at. If you think about it, when you walk across a painting in a museum, the first thing you see is the painting at 10 or 15 feet away, and that's really the distance that you want your painting to hold up its best. It really is about subdividing larger shapes into smaller shapes. As you can see now, I'm starting to create little shadows under the eyelids and starting to paint the actual curve of the eyelid. Just fun little shapes that exist on top of the bigger shapes that I've already established. Had I not established those shapes earlier, it'd be next to impossible to fit this shape in accurately. I'd like to thank you all for getting this far in my portrait painting video. I know it's a very long video. And this is really the last two brushstrokes I'm going to do. It's going to be the nose ring, and I have the shadow side of the nose ring, and I'm about to put in the light for the highlight. And that's all you really need for a small bit of information like that. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for more weekly portrait painting demonstrations.